Hi, friends and family,
Welcome to Hope After Addiction
with your hosts, Katie Comer.
and Chelsea McLeod. Good morning, Hope After Addiction family. We're glad to have you today, and we know Katie looks a little different today. We have a special guest, and it's my husband, John. And Katie and I have just been talking a lot about just having the different perspectives, and we know people love to hear both sides of the story. And so John is joining us today, and then we're going to have Adam and Katie at some point to join us. So how are you today, sweetheart?
I'm doing well. Busy middle of the week, and but good things. Lots going on, so it's it's a good day.
Good. John is spinning a lot of plates right now, so I appreciate him
Spinning a lot of plates.
coming in, and which is a neat part of our season, because spinning plates today looks a lot different than it did 7 years ago. So pretty special.
Yeah, I was sharing with somebody yesterday. It's we've got a couple new guys on the call team, and it can interrupt home life, and it can interrupt home life more than we want it to. But Chelsea's always said that, one of the things is if I get up from the dinner table today, it's to go potentially pull somebody out of the pits. Whereas before it would be me picking a fight to go justify getting high. So it's definitely a different season of busy, and we're grateful for it. And it just, allows us to continue drawing closer to the Lord, and as long as we make sure we're doing it in the spirit and not in the flesh, right? So yeah, it's a beautiful season.
Yeah. So John works for all that don't know, he works for the sister ministry S2L that we work alongside of. And so he is, a lot of you wives, mothers, sisters who have called in, John's been your contact or your final contact through the process that you speak through. So a lot of people know John, which is fun. He gets to walk you through some really tough times. So do you want to tell a little bit of our story just to refresh for the ones that don't know?
Yeah, this is it's always challenging to wrap it up in a couple minutes, but short story is struggle with addiction for many years, almost 16 years, and I was running from myself, and it took me to the far reaches of the continent, really, and just trying to fulfill a void that wasn't fillable without the Lord. The Lord brought me full circle back to Richmond Hill, where I was born and raised, and that's where I met Chelsea. And wasn't long after her and I started dating that she was able to figure out that something wasn't right. And so that was the beginning of the end. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but ultimately that's where I ended up at S2L. And then shortly after being at S2L, there was a level of hope that I didn't even know existed. Wanted to be a part of it. Was very just motivated to want to share that hope and do some things, and I talked to Pastor Adam and told him that I wanted to open up an S2L in Georgia, and he slowed me down and said, "Hey man, you hadn't even been here 2 weeks. Let's not get the cart ahead of the horse." And so he asked me to stay. I wanted to stay. I asked to stay and stay on staff, and it was going to be almost a 2-year deal, and here we are 6 years later. And we're pretty settled in where we are right now. We're pretty grateful to be where we are, and I wouldn't change anything. And I don't say that lightly, because I know that change comes when we say those sort of things. But we're in a really good place, and just grateful to have the opportunity to be where we are today.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because John always grew up on the coast, and he swore that he would never live in a landlocked state, and here we are. Many years later, and we love it. We love home. We love what God's done. Yeah. It hasn't come easy. It hasn't come without a fight with everything that we have, and that's the special part, is just taking what God has for us and embracing it.
Yeah, as soon as we get where things are running smoothly, something will happen like a child, and it'll challenge us to another level. And so we're continuously having to grow through this. And the beautiful thing is, I believe that, I know that I am in a season, and I hope that Chelsea is as well, but the challenge doesn't come with the scare of necessarily getting high today. And so we've kind of gone into a new season there, and it's a beautiful thing. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that I won't never get high. I'm not going to be complacent or prideful like that. But I know that when I'm struggling today, the thoughts are different than they were yesterday, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, and that's a neat story just to dig into, because so many ask about trust. Like, how am I ever going to trust them again? Because in the beginning, it seems absolutely impossible. And I went through that for a long time, where even after rehab and all the things, it still looked impossible to me. It still looked like a lot of doubt, a lot of fear. And I've talked about this before, but I called Katie when he was going home one weekend, and I was like, I'm just struggling. Like, I don't know if I can do this. And Katie said, you're going to enter into new levels of trust. And it's really neat, because this many years later, I know what she was talking about, because it's not my every consuming thought. It's not my every consuming fear. It's not my every consuming doubt. And so sitting here today, I don't know where you are, but it's like John the Baptist sitting in prison, watching God heal everybody else, but saving him out of prison. But God was still doing something. And so no matter where you are right now, God is doing something in your story, and he is watching you. He's collecting your tears. He sees you. He knows. And so just remember that, a whole novel, if there's one chapter missing, none of the novel makes sense. And so no matter where you are today, I know it's hard sometimes to sit here and see people that are doing it, see people that are making it. We have friends that are enduring relapse right now and tough things, and just, it's hard sometimes. And so we are here to encourage you today, and to keep pushing you, and to keep giving you hope despite where you are. And so trust is something that is attainable, and we've had to fight really, really hard for that. And it's taken John being completely, what's the right word? Open to that. And us doing it as a team, because it takes both of us completely.
Yeah, for sure. And there's times you're going to be weak, and there's times that you're going to struggle, and there's times that, you're going to want to revert back to old ways. And, you can't use it as an excuse. If you're still manipulating or subconsciously manipulating yourself into believing crazy things that just don't even make sense, then you're not going to do well. But I mean, there's a time where I was able to, and still I am able to share with Chelsea my struggles. And when I'm not okay, I'm not doing that to manipulate her in any way. At least I hope that I'm not. There's still times I have to suppress myself and put the flesh away. But, I do it so that she can understand where I'm coming from. And it's a time for me to share with her, I'm struggling. And when I'm struggling, the first person that's going to catch the brunt of it is Chelsea. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different reasons for that psychologically, but one of the biggest is because I know she's not going anywhere, so I can beat on her instead of beating on one of my guys or my boss or the pastor or somebody at church or whatever it is, because I know that she's going to come back around. And so a lot of times if I can see that person coming, and not to say that I need to justify it or that it's okay, because it's not, but I'm still growing as well, and that's the process of sanctification. But just sharing my heart with Chelsea so that she has a good understanding. And instead of getting offended by my actions, then she can actually have grace for it, and maybe even come give me a hug instead of, rebuking me, And so that's where it's cool to be transparent at those places and just be open. And I think it's very important, because we need to do whatever we can possibly do to, suppress the flesh. It's hard, but it's necessary.
Yeah, and big lesson, friends. Sometimes all they need is a hug.
A lot of times all I need is a hug.
A lot of times all he wants is a hug, and that was hard, because I want to talk through it and listen, and there's so much power in literally walking up and giving him a hug, and everything is settled. And I'm still learning that I'm not good at that, and so I'm still learning that it's like I just needed a hug.
What was it the other day? I was struggling. Had a couple really hard weeks, mm-hmm. and especially one really hard weekend, in just crazy ways. But I think it was like Monday morning or something. Chelsea's like, "Hey, do you need a hug?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then she walked off.
I got busy doing it, and I never hugged him. He's like, "I just needed a hug."
I was like, "Where's you just asked me if I needed a hug, and I didn't get a hug." But
story of my life with a toddler.
So we're learning, but it's cool that we're able to learn, and it's hard sometimes when you want to be upset or offended or whatever it is to go and give a person a hug. Our marriage counselor a while back, he would tell us when we get in those places, he said, all right, when y'all get in a place like that, go hold each other's hands and
look at each other
and then fight it out, you know.
Yeah.
And usually once you're holding hands there, and you know, whatever emotions were flaring up, pride, being offended, any of those things, insecurities, a lot of them will usually subside pretty quickly.
You can typically feel that heartbeat in their hands, and so that'll mess you up real quick.
Just little tricks we've learned over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I've learned that's been really precious and humbling is, you know, we look at them as the fault, and we look at them as the messed up ones and the messy ones, and in the middle of addiction they are. But even walking through this is, I'm just as much of a broken human as John is. And so in the midst of his, like, whatever it may be, I have him too. I have bad days. I have good days, and he does too. And so it's a thing that I really have to learn. I've had to learn grace. I've had to learn humbleness, to remember that on his bad days, I have him too. I handle mine differently than he does. And that's the one thing. We're two completely different humans doing life together. And so sometimes it's easy to hold them accountable for their past and their past mistakes. And I have to remember that I'm just as messy as he is. You know, you're just as messy as I am. I knew there'd be a couple amens today. But it's true. And in those moments that, you know, even going back to his past, I'm like, Chelsea, you've got a past too. Like, Chelsea, you've made a lot of mistakes too. Chelsea, you've sinned too. And so in those moments where I want to point the finger at him, God points it back at me and was like, don't forget how messy you are too. It's like throwing stones, you know, don't forget that you could be stoned right now too. And so that's one of the things that really helps me in our battles and in his hard times, to grace, because I'm just as messy as he is. We all are. I don't care who's watching this. We're all human. And another thing, if there are couples watching this, Katie and I met with a friend last week, and they've been going through a season, and she talked about how he has opened up to her, like, hey, I'm having these thoughts, or hey, I'm thinking about this, and how much power's in that. And John and I, like he said, he opens up, and sometimes it aches to hear, because I'm like, ugh, you know, but there is so much beauty and trust and overcoming in that, because he feels vulnerable enough to talk to me about it. And whatever is brought into the light is crushed. Whatever stays in darkness, that's where it's dangerous. And so I encourage whoever's listening on the opposing end is, be that person that's vulnerable enough to hear it and to talk through it with them. Because I'm telling you, and John's had a couple crazy experiences, once it's brought to light, it's done.
Yeah, and you can't be selfish about the delivery, right? You got to do it in the right spirit, because we can selfishly do those things, and we could, in a crazy way, be justifying some sort of a behavior or whatever it is. So you got to make sure that you're doing it in the right spirit and you're delivering it for the right reasons. And, you know, when you bring it in a light that way, then, you know, the enemy has no reign over it at that point in time, and he doesn't have authority anyways. And so, you know, the more we can crush him, the better we'll be. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and that's a good point, because we do work with couples where they'll throw it in their faces, or they'll do it as a fear tactic to their spouse or to their loved one. And that's not the way to go about it. You know, when John comes to me and says, hey, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm super overwhelmed right now, you know, and we talk about it, it's done from the heart, not from a selfish
do it
place.
For vulnerability. Don't do it for control, right? And
manipulation.
That's what happens, is you find yourself trying to control a situation where this is what I'm going to go do, or because this is where we are, I'm going to go do this, or, you know, I just don't even care anymore. Like, all that stuff is definitely with the wrong attitude. It's, hey, I'm struggling right now, and I've actually, you know, maybe had a thought that I shouldn't have, or maybe I want to quit, you know, whatever that is, but it can't be, you know, just a vicious I quit. It needs to be, hey, I'm struggling to get through this and I need some help, you know. And so that way you're coming alongside. Another thing our marriage counselor taught us is that you can't sit across the table from each other and you know, compassionately, like you literally, like he would tell us, get everything you've got out on the table. You're sitting across from each other and you're casting your stones or whatever it is. And then one of you has got to be big enough to come around to the other side and sit alongside that person and say, okay, here I am. There's our stuff. What are we going to do with it? And so now we can do it together. We've come alongside of each other. And so that spirit of offense, that's what it comes down to, is pride, right? And any time that we're struggling, we can usually call pride in one another. We can't really call it in one another, because then we'll get that much more prideful. But that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And it's true. And there's actually a psychological to what he said. The best way to have a conversation with a male specifically is side by side. The best way is in a car, in a restaurant, sitting on the same side of the booth, which the couples you look at and you're like, man, y'all are lovey-dovey. But a male does not feel attacked if you are sitting across from him staring in his eyes. And so they say the best way psychologically to have a conversation with a male is go for a walk down the road. Do it in a car. The best way is side by side, which I think it's funny because Mike had always told us, like, get on the same side of the table, because then you're literally aligned in partnership that way. So that was a neat thing.
Yeah.
We've asked a couple questions to a couple of our couples, just what would you like to hear us talk about? And one of the things was, what are some things we do to maintain a healthy relationship today? To maintain sobriety, to maintain marriage, to maintain...
Yeah, I mean, I think the sobriety side of it today, 6 years in, is not... it's not the forefront. Mm-hmm. I don't wake up thinking about it. I don't go to sleep thinking about it. I don't have the dreams today. A lot of that stuff's going away. And you know, I struggled for a long time with people that say that they just woke up. In fact, one of our... the guy who wrote our curriculum, he said he woke up in the ditch one day and never had another craving, and that's part of his testimony. And I really struggled to receive him because of that. But then when he, you know, one day I saw him and he had a bag full of it was 1-day chips or 30-day chips or whatever chips that was, but he had a bag full of them. And so what I realized then was that he didn't just wake up in the ditch one day and not have a craving ever again. Maybe he did wake up in that ditch, but I didn't understand what it took for him to wake up in that ditch and not have those cravings again. And I believe wholeheartedly that I'm coming into a season where that is me, where I don't have those cravings. And in fact, I even have a moment to where I haven't had the cravings since, you know, a weak moment that I've had. But, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, the sobriety side of it comes. We talk about cleaning the inside of the cup and the outside will clean itself. And so I believe that's what we do. And when we struggle with addiction, it's a unhealthy solution. It's a temporary solution for a bigger problem. But as far as our marriage, I'm in school right now. As busy as everything is, I went back to school and I'm going for ministry leadership. And there's like 6 people in our class, and our professor the other day partnered us with one of the peers in the class to kind of do a peer review of an essay. And I got paired with a female. And so at the end of class, she's emailing me, she's texting me and stuff, and I didn't reply to her or anything. And I started a group text with Chelsea, and I just explained to her, and I kind of went through it because she's not in our circle, so she doesn't really know how we live and what we do. And at first, the insecurities of, well, she's probably going to think that I've cheated on Chelsea at some point, or there's no trust in the relationship, or whatever it is. But really what I'm doing is maintaining the trust that's there. Yeah. And I've never given Chelsea any reason to doubt our relationship as far as, you know, stepping out on her or anything. But I did. I started it and I said, hey, this is what we do, and you know, this is how we're going to communicate. And she was 100% behind it. But yeah, those are just the little things, because I could have easily had that conversation with her and we went on about our business, but that's not respectful of my relationship, our relationship, and you know, I want to respect Chelsea, my wife, and our home, and those are ways that we can do that, and there's accountability inside of that, right? So just little things like that, just being transparent, not putting yourself in situations where you can cultivate any sort of emotional relationship with the opposite sex or whatever that may be. That's one that was probably one of the bigger ones this week, just because of that situation. I was uncomfortable. I was like, oh, what do I do? How do I get through this? And it was like, I'm just going to start a group text.
Yeah, he called. He said, was that weird? I was like, no. And I got to talk to her too. Yeah, and she was awesome. But it's just accountability on every front. Our bank accounts, our money, everything we do is connected because of our past. And why would it not be? If there's nothing to hide, there's nothing that shouldn't be connected in marriage. And I heard at a retreat, what was that, 3 weeks ago that I went probably? But between a yes and receiving, there is 10,000 things that God wants to do. And I found that to be really neat because, you know, we say yes to this. We say yes to this marriage. We say yes to so many things, but God has so much to do in the middle of what he wants to do in the ultimate outcome. I mean, you think getting to the Red Sea, there's so much. But I remember John was going home one weekend and just accountability and stuff. And it may have been the weekend I talked to Katie. I don't know. But I was going home with him that weekend, but I was taking a bath. And I may have talked about this before, but God, just praying about it, just fervently worrying about it, really. And God said, Chelsea, there's still things I need to do in him. And I was like, okay, God, that's all I needed to hear. And I guess it was that Saturday you had gone to do something, hunting, fishing, something. And he came home that night and he came up to the bedroom and he said, there is still so much that I need to learn. And I was just like, and I never told him this because I don't tell him what God and I talk about, you know, in those moments that God like works on my heart specifically. And I was like, God, I heard you that night. Like I heard you right. And so I was talking to a friend about this the other day is we want instant gratification and instant satisfaction. And it's all these little things like that accountability, like that trust, the 10,000 things in the middle that God's doing to build who we're becoming. And like, we're not there yet. We've not arrived. We still have our moments. We still have our tough times, but it's all these little things, the trust, the triggers, accountability, all of that is building who we are today. And I know, and John said on the last podcast he did with us, he's like, fight with everything you have because it's worth it.
Yeah, it's totally worth it.
It's not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. A lot of the stuff that I've realized that I don't, like the growth from what Chelsea's talking about is I'll even try and go back to these places that I don't belong anymore. And I'm not talking about like bellying up at the bar or, you know, going to see the dope man or, you know, whatever it may be to fulfill the fleshly desires. But there's little situations. We were even watching a TV show, and you know, we actually watched it last night. Like, just crazy enough that we actually sat down. I think it was around 8:30 last night, and started watching a 40-minute show. But there's a bunch of seasons in the show, and they took a few years off, and you know, they just started doing a couple more seasons, and so we've been watching it, and it's like, I looked at Chelsea last night, and I said, this show's not as clean as I remember it being. And so the question was, man, have they kind of gotten more worldly, or have we just kind of gotten further along to where we've removed ourselves from, you know, more of that kind of stuff? And so I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to go back and study the episodes that we watched before, but it's just kind of crazy how, you know, you go along and even people, places, or things like, I'll go back to somewhere and think that it's something that I enjoyed, and I did at one point in time, but today I don't enjoy it. And I have to go figure that out on my own, because if Chelsea was to say, hey, you shouldn't do that, well, that's just going to make me want to do it more. But going and getting to experience it, and I'm not telling people to go do things that they used to do by any stretch. There's a time and a place for that. And you have to be at a certain place in your walk. And I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody else either. I just know how the journey goes and how the Lord speaks to us, and how, you know, I remember the last time I ate a couple pills and immediately was just completely busted up over it. And I wholeheartedly believe that it had to happen, because the Lord said, hey, you big dummy, you think you want to be here, but you really don't, and I'm going to show you. And so He made it very convenient, and there's so many different ways you could look at that. But what I do know is that when I took those pills, it took me to a place that I did not want to be. The place I thought I was going to go wasn't where I went, and it was absolutely miserable. And the desire for that has completely gone away. And I can say that here wholeheartedly. And you know, it took me to the next season. It took me to the next level in our book, in our chapter, however you want to look at that. But it was really wild how that whole thing went down. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and try whatever it is that you used to do to see if you like it, but that's just my story, and that's how the Lord revealed it to me.
Yeah, and it's special, and the power of prayer and the Holy Spirit. I mean, you were wrecked when you came to me. And I say that because we have endured relapse, multiple. And so the Holy Spirit was 100% in that situation, and we walked through it together and did it together, and God moved in mighty ways in that. Yeah,
I mean, it was the first time I remember I laid on the kitchen floor and cried like a baby. And, you know, Chelsea didn't know what to think. But I exposed myself. I told on myself. I took it to the right places and the right people. And, you know, it was really a beautiful thing. But, you know, again, I don't encourage anybody to go dance, on the fence like that by any stretch. I didn't ask to go do it. It just happened. And I didn't have a plan in place to protect myself either at that point in time. So you learn from it. You
do. And it goes back to the power of prayer, and just like the story of us going home, like there's been many scary, crazy God situations, not necessarily scary, but where I've had to pray like, God, this is not a battle that I can fight. This is surrender. And I can't do this. Only you can. And he has worked in crazy. There was a job situation, and John, he needed out. And I just prayed and prayed and prayed, and I finally surrendered it, versus trying to control it. And John came home 2 days later, and he was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And quit that night. And I was like, God, you're so good. And so don't underestimate the power of prayer that we have over their lives and for their lives, and how incredible it is to the trajectory of their lives. God uses us. Yeah. We are not the Holy Spirit. We are not their God, but God does use us to pray over them, and God hears our prayers. So another question, I think this is probably fairly easy, but how did we have to change our lives in order to gain what we have today? My easy answer was everything.
Literally, answer.
Literally.
Yeah, we had, you have to let go. And a lot of times, like for me, I had to be at a place of full surrender. So that way, the Lord has slowly started putting things back in my life that I used to enjoy. One of the things is I used to go offshore fishing. I mean, the license that I have from the Coast Guard, it takes almost 10 years of time on the ocean just to be able to qualify to go take the 3-part test. It's crazy. And I couldn't tell you the last time I was on the ocean, right? And so, I talk about letting go of everything, people, everything. And, there's some friends that I let go of 6 years ago that have just come around in the last 6 months. And if they do come around, they're going to have to come around my way. Because I'm not going back their way. And, there's places that we haven't been. There's everything. We had to change everything. And so what's happening is, and I remember when I was on my Trace DS weekend, I spent 15 years as a professional hunting and fishing guide, and I was super passionate about it. And I had contacts that we could, and there was pride in it. I mean, I was proud to have these contacts, but I could go do anything in this continent that I wanted to go do. Brown bears, monster whitetail in Canada, pheasant, whatever. I mean, anything, ducks, anything that you wanted to go do. I had somebody in my phone that would be excited about hosting us and taking us, chasing, pigs and with helicopters and all kinds of stuff. And man, I literally threw that phone away. And the Lord has slowly been putting people back in my life that have the ability to do those things. Just like with a friend the other day, I saw he was doing some duck hunting in Arkansas, and I know he's a good, clean guy. And I messaged him and was like, hey, man, you got a good, clean group that you can do that with? And he's like, yeah, man, anytime you want to come, but it's in his timing, And there's even been a couple trips that I could have went on that I didn't go on, and that's a whole nother story of how the Lord protected me through that. And I'm talking about backed out last minute. But yeah, I had to change everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too, because we're working with a couple couples with this right now, is when they come home and they are on fire, support them in that. I know sometimes it gets tiring, it gets weary, but if they want to be at church or with a group, fellowship 5 nights a week, support them in that. And it's huge because we have such an influence as wives and as spouses, whoever may be listening to this, mothers, fathers. Don't go against them. Support what they want to do, because that is what's going to catapult them into changing everything. That's what's going to keep them afresh on God and on this new life that they've chosen. And that's just really important. Don't say, hey, stay home tonight, or that's where the degrees start getting lost. And I know it's hard on us. I know it's tough, but we wouldn't change it for the world. Okay, final question. What is your top advice to any person that struggled with addiction and is going back home to family?
Yeah, I'd say don't get worried about money and work. That's definitely one of the top motivators to pull somebody out of being in treatment, because they start worrying about how they're going to pay for this, how they're going to pay for that. I wholeheartedly believe that if you're following the Lord and allowing Him to lead, He's going to take care of those things. And He's probably going to take care of them in ways that you didn't even know existed. I mean, I can't tell you how many times the checks showed up in the mailbox that paid for a bill that we didn't know we were going to be able to, how we were going to pay for it. And so there's like everything that everything doesn't come from S2L and working for that ministry. I'm grateful for that and blessed beyond to have the ability and the opportunity to serve there. But there's times that it just doesn't get us through the things that we need to get through. And you can worry about that, fear, all that stuff. But man, God's never let us down, right? We've never missed a bill since, and so don't get in a hurry to try and make it happen. Let the Lord make it happen and allow him to lead. I say that, be the first one in, last one out, right? Turn the lights on the way in the church and sweep your way out. And what you do then, and it's not going to be easy. There's going to be times that you don't want to go. I used to say, fake it till you make it, and that never really sounded right. And I had a friend of mine share with me the other night. He called me after I said it and told him it was like it felt a little bit funky, but he's like, discipline before desire. And so what we have to do is put ourselves there in that environment. And there's a time where you're creating a new normal that it will allow that discipline to become a desire where you'll want those things. You'll want to plug in that church. What's the most important thing to do when you go home? I'd say find mentor, find accountability, find a church to plug into. And when I say plug into a church, I'm not talking about Sunday morning. I'm talking about every time the doors open for the first month that you're plugging into a church, be there so you have an idea what their ministry's like, so you can figure out where you need to settle in. And then the Lord's going to probably provide you a job through that, right? Just depending on the church or whatever it may be.
Connections.
But yeah, have your priorities right and don't get in a hurry. Slow walk that thing and allow the Lord to lead it. And if you're trying to control it, it's not going to end well.
Yep. And the other one about patience that you always advise guys, women.
Chelsea loves this one.
I do love this one. I'm like, you can't not say this one.
So I always say that when we find ourselves in treatment, our wives are the patient ones dealing with us. And then we go off to church camp for a little while. And while we're gone, our wives are back home holding the fort down, taking care of the kids, paying the bills, doing everything to keep life going. And then we come home and we want to demand this and we want to demand that because we're better and we're not going back to these places. But the reality is they don't know that, and we haven't had an opportunity to prove ourselves. And so be patient with them. I say it like this. It's like when I went into treatment, I was down here, Chelsea was up here, and then she's trying to hold down all the bills and all the fort and, just life. And so where I went past, Chelsea was growing at a slower rate. And so now I've got to, where she pulled me up and then I passed her, now it's my job to pull her up. We got to be patient. And we've got to be patient with trust. We got to be patient with accountability. We got to be patient with the way they approach us. Chelsea's not my authority, right? And so one of the easiest ways to explain it was, at first she would demand a drug test and wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing things I shouldn't be doing. But there come a time where, and that just wasn't right. It just wasn't right. She shouldn't have to. It's not in order. That's not being obedient. That's not being the leader of the home. So the shift happened to where if she looked at me a certain way, man, I would say, hey, babe, let's go take a drug test. And so therefore I'm showing her that I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. And now we're in a place where I couldn't even tell you the last time I took a drug test. And if I get a little giddy or if I'm
hanging a ceiling fan at 10 o'clock at night,
if I'm just full of joy, right? She's like, "What's wrong with this guy?" But the reality is it's a beautiful thing, and there's a lot of trust, and so it's cool because I can go to that place now, and she doesn't look at me like, "Oh, he's high, he's doing something he shouldn't be doing," and so instead of enjoying the moment, she goes into this defense mode of what's wrong, what is he doing he shouldn't be doing, and so. Fortunately, we're not in that season, so there's growth in that as well.
You can hang as many ceiling fans at 10 o'clock at night.
But take it slow. Don't get in a hurry.
Yeah. It's a good one. Well, we thank y'all for joining us. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Taking time out of your crazy schedule. And it's been awesome. And we sit here because we are not perfect. And we are a marriage couple that is still figuring it out and still fighting through it, still fighting for it. We're not any further. We're not any better than you. We are just right here showing the things that just have changed our lives. And so we thank you.
Be teachable, be coachable, and want to grow.
Yeah, that's right. It's a good one. So thank you. If you liked it, if you want to share it, please share Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. comment. We love questions. And so Katie and I have started doing a new thing on the questions. So if you have any questions, please leave them in here, private message us, whatever that looks like. And we thank you, and we're praying for you, and we hope you have a great day.
God bless.
Mm-hmm.